In any life, we have highs and lows, light and dark, wins and losses. What happens when we encounter that moment in time when what happens next could change everything? Join us as we step into another person's inspirational moment and see how we can connect their experience to ours. This is Greg Stevens, and you're listening to A Shot of Inspiration. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of A Shot of Inspiration. Am really excited about my guest. He is a new friend. I actually was teaching a class in crucial accountability, and my guest, Clinton McRae, he was actually in my class, and we hit it off. And he was telling me that he wrote a book called Parent Leadership for Today, and he's going to talk about his book. What brought him to that. And I just found Clinton to be just an amazing person to interact with. So I'm really excited that he's here. Clinton, thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here. Always excited to have an opportunity to share, to talk about my passion. So
great. Well, thanks.
One of the things I'm passionate about, but yeah.
Well,
One
Clinton,
of the things.
What I would ask is, tell our audience a little about yourself and what you do. I know you're a minister as well as you work for a company. So let people know what you do, and then what led you to write your book about parenting with leadership.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so she's introduced. Name's Clinton McRae. I'm retired Chief Petty Officer off the Harry Truman, carrier guy, Navy nuke through and through. I did 20 years in the Navy. I've been in the shipyard for 20 years. Somewhere around about 5 years into my service working in the shipyard doing reactor systems training, I had an opportunity to go to Regent University and get a master's degree in organizational leadership. So I got that degree. I used it a little bit to help engineers, and I kind of convinced my leadership, hey, if you send me to school and let me get this degree, I'll help engineers. And so that's what it was all about. I did some of that, but then I ended up relocating to another department. Things really changed at NAVC. They got big into leadership, wanted the engineers to kind of take the lead on the deck plate. And so they kind of gave us a B item and says, hey, you guys need to develop your people. Young people need skills before they put the hat on. And so I got a barrage of people knocking on my door saying, okay, reactor stuff is great, Clint, but we need to develop our people. Can you help us out? And so that's really what really pushed me into doing leadership training full time. Since that time, it's been almost 3 years ago, I have got certified in 9 different classes, half of them that I generated myself, half of them sponsored by NAVC. The last one I just did with you, Greg, Crucial Accountability. So I just feel really blessed. I tell people I got the best job in the shipyard, and sometimes people try to challenge me, but I really do have the best job. So I love what I do. I love what I do, blessed and honored. So that's kind of the day job. And so I tell people all the time, big leadership guy, that's who I am, what I do. Also assistant pastor at my local church. I've been in ministry for 30 years and counting. Had opportunity to have my own work, but just God hasn't led me to do that. Somewhere along the way, I ended up writing books. The first book I wrote is called Blessed to Be Broken. And that was kind of a bio with what God did with me in the military and how he blessed me and then he broke me. I think that principle of blessed to be broken, broken to be a blessing is one of those universal constructs. I don't really care who you are. In the life of the believer, God always blesses people, and at some point he takes you into the wilderness. He takes you into the desert. And you see that with his own son, that he has his baptism, and after his baptism, the scripture says, and he was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. Kind of interesting. You get your inauguration, and then you're led into the wilderness. And so that's when he was broke with the 40 days. So that blessed to be broken and broken to be a blessing, that's what I experienced. I write about that in that book. Had no idea that would then turn into me writing another book, which got me into Regent and as a published author. And then from there, I got my master's degree doing leadership training. I have a friend who's a principal at a school. We were talking about helping his teachers. And so I just got this degree. I go, well, I could do some stuff on communication within your staff. I did this training, and he was like, Clint, man, this is great stuff. He says, but if you could help my parents, that would be better. He says, can you provide some communication training, some leadership training for my parents? And I was thinking to myself, my friend Vincent Darby, good guy. He's a brother from another mother. I got a few brothers from another mother. And so I was like, dude, they sent me to do organization. I got leadership from an organizational standpoint, not parenting. I don't know. So I did some research on the web and found out there's something that's called parental coaching. It's its own discipline, its own demographic, parent coaching. And so it started off as doing parental coaching. And so I did a fair amount of that in his school. Other principals was calling, and I was doing this parent coaching thing. And I that kind of ran its course there for a while. And the Holy Spirit wasn't really, I was feeling it, but I felt that it was a little bit more. And I was trying to really get my signature, because parental coaching is what it is. And so that's when the Lord kind of dropped on me that you're a leadership guy. Instead of doing parental coaching, call it parent leadership. And so that's how the name kind of became parent leadership. And it just felt organic. It just felt natural, because I'm doing leadership training anyway. And so the whole gist kind of the parent leadership for today is that I'm fully convinced that parents are the CEOs of their home. I think if families are successful, parents have a lot to do with it. And then, some people says, well, I didn't have the best mom, the best dad. But parenting goes beyond the DNA. Parenting is beyond the biological, that you can be a parent. Another word for parent is guardian. Another word for parent is nurturer. And so I tell people all the time that you don't have to have children biologically to be a parent leader. What you have to have is that if there's a child that will allow you to lead them, then that qualifies you as a parent leader. So you think about leadership, Maxwell talks about, when you distill it down, and there's 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, he says it's all about influence. If you say you're a leader but don't have influence, then you're probably not really a leader. You're not very effective. And so if a child will allow you to lead them, have influence, then that qualifies you as a parent leader. And then we just kind of took off from there. And that's when I ended up lecturing in schools. And then from the schools, I ended up writing a book, because people were saying, if you're lecturing, go ahead and write the book. And that's how I ended up writing the book. And then there's a workbook, and, so.
That's great.
I'm doing a lot of talking now, so I don't know.
That's great. Well,
okay, I don't know. I'm doing a lot of talking, but.
Well, you said something in there. You said if the child, let's say someone, is married into it and they have a stepchild. You said if the child's willing to allow you to lead, what do you find is important for a child to feel that they want to be led? What characteristic, or what can a parent do to help that child want to be led?
Probably the biggest thing, that the child feel loved. The child needs to feel valued. The child feels loved and valued, then they'll open up and they'll let you lead them. But they have to feel loved. It's one thing, Gary Chapman wrote the 5 love languages for parenting. For couples, and he writes it for children. I have his book, and he's got it for teens and all this stuff. But that was one of the biggest takeaways, was that children, it's one thing kind of having a head knowledge. If you talk to families in general, the son or the daughter say, well, I know my dad loves me, I know my mom loves me, but then do they feel the love? And feeling the love and knowing the love are two different things. They're quite diverse. And unfortunately, sometimes parents feel as though if they're feeding and clothing their children, then that love, that closeness will just be automatic. And the truth is that it's not. Just because you feed and clothe your child does not mean that, you know, this real sense of closeness is there, and the transparency and authenticity, that's not that at all. And so children end up reaching out and connecting with other individuals to find the love, because everyone wants to be loved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone
Absolutely.
wants to be loved, right? So it's
Yeah.
just a matter of you as a parent doing what's needed to connect with that child so that they can feel loved.
Yeah. Well, in that vein of someone feeling love where they possibly didn't, I know you as coaching parents through the years and writing the book, what are some of your biggest inspirational moments that you've seen parents have breakthroughs around that space from understanding that breakthrough around love? I'm sure you probably have different ones. I love to hear stories about the breakthroughs that people have. So could you share one or two of those?
Yeah, I guess I really, I think about myself as a grandparent, the whole sense of love, that is very real. I talk about if there's a lack of love, if there's a lack of transparency, then kind of how do you get there? And how you get there is something that I call the arc double T. It's in the book. It's called the arc double T. And so in chatting with parents too, is that the one thing that social workers and other people will tell you is that your sense of availability, that children want you. Your son wants you, your daughter wants you, so your availability. So if there is a lack of love and it's, you don't see much of it, or there's no real authenticity there, then mom and dad, you need to make yourself available. Do more than whatever you're doing with the sense of availability. And that availability, making yourself availability, speaks volumes to the worth and the character as to the value that you really value in the relationship. And that sense of availability could be something as simple as, you know what, once a week or every other week, we're going to go to Chick-fil-A, and this is our mommy daughters night. You know, once a week, we're going to cook cookies, and that's kind of what we do. Once a week, we're going to go fishing, whatever that is. But when you take the time to make yourself available, that is huge. And the breakthrough is phenomenal. I have a psych degree. I got an undergrad in psych. And so one of the things that I discovered is that sense of just kind of taking your time to connect with people. When I was I had a tour in Hawaii, got my psych degree there at Chaminade University. And I would tell you, Greg, I was amazed that at the beginning of every class for like 30 minutes, we kind of had a, how's it going, you know, and it was a 10-week class. And I began to share and unpack things with people in the room that I didn't even share within folks in my church, with it, you know, like I was like amazed. So it's like your availability. I mean, we cannot minimize you really making yourself available to your son and daughter. If you're looking for that breakthrough, it just speaks volumes. My grandchildren look forward to spending time with me, hanging out with me, you know, hey, Papa, this is our time, you know, and that breakthrough, it happens again and again. When I talk to parents, it happens again. You have to, when you take the time to do that, it speaks volumes as to you valuing the relationship.
Absolutely.
And that's huge. And sometimes parents, you know, might not think much about it, but children are watching, you know, and if you'll take time to go golfing with your buddy, if you'll take time to do something with a coworker, a friend, and you'll spend time with them to do that, but you won't do it with your son and daughter, then you know, once again, the child's not feeling the love. Right. Does my dad love me? Yes, he does. But does he spend quality time with me? No, not really. You know what I mean? So, yeah. But he goes golfing. He's committed to that. He's committed to this. He's committed to his job, you know. So the children just having to feel that love. Like there's a gentleman that I know, his daughter makes these little bracelets, and he's kind of up, you know, higher up in the food chain. And she just told him, Dad, you know, I miss you. And so, you know, I'm going to make this little bracelet. And so when you're putting in those hours, look at the bracelet, think about me, you know. It was those kind of things. And he was like, Clint, you know, I had to have a moment like, I'm spending too much time at work.
Yeah. 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 I have a friend of mine, when you said that, it reminded me, he made sure, he's a very busy executive, but he had a daughter and a son, and he would spend one day a week, well, one morning, to take one of them to breakfast, and then the next day, the other one. He had that individual time with them. And he said he didn't miss those times. He said, even when it was tough, when they're going through those teenage years, don't want to really spend time. He said, but that consistency helped keep them connected, even at times when it was difficult. But he also told me something. He said, Greg, he said, what I also learned was many times during that time, stop the parenting, just listen, really try to understand what they're going through. He said many times it would be really silent, but he would give it that time to listen. But you have to give the time and the attention to be able to do that.
Right. Yeah. So that's pretty powerful. So that is the A in the availability. The R is making sure that it's relative, that it's something that you and the child wants. It's nothing that, you know, because as children get older, really, they're pretty smart, and you have to kind of earn their right. I've had conversations with other men and say, you know, okay, I'm gonna do what I need to do, and I'm gonna take my son here. We're gonna do this and do that, and it's like, well, does your son want to do that? Right. I mean, does your son want, you know, you say, I'm going to spend, yeah, Clint, I'm going to spend time with him and we're going to go do this, but does your son want to do that? So make sure that it's relative, that, you know, okay, he or she does want to do that, right? And then from there, then you have to, the C is being consistent. And that's what your friend, right? You have to be consistent. So you can't be hit and miss. The sense of consistency, because once again, that means a lot, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I think that's one of the things I've also found in doing leadership work. If you want to be a great leader, you need to learn to be a great follower at some point. And you have to do that. Mentoring programs are great, but as you lead, I think you create, just like leaders create a culture within their organizations, leaders create a culture within their family.
Yep. Yeah.
And
It's down.
Yeah, and it's so important, because that culture is what sustains during the difficult times. And so in that vein, what were some of the things you did with your family to lead the way that created the culture of your family? What are some of the things that really pop into your mind around that?
I made sure that I put them first. When I, you know, like when I thought about different tours and different jobs that I had, they didn't know this, but there were certain jobs that I forewent because I thought about, that's going to take too much time away from my family. That's gonna put me in some remote, isolated place, and my family's not going to be in a good place. So I always thought about the tour of duty, where I was going, and, you know, what, you know, could I find a place of fellowship? Could I find worship? So I always kind of thought about the spiritual part of making sure that was couched, because I was not raised in church, didn't do Sunday school, didn't do anything. I didn't come to know the Lord until I was like 20. And so I had a life of craziness up until 20. So I had 20 years of craziness. So I thought, okay, and you know, and God really changed my life. And so I made that a priority. And so honoring him and putting him first and thinking about jobs, that was huge. Another thing that I did was that I rewarded my children. I created a culture of reward. So I realized that, you know, my job as a parent is to prepare them for what is coming, to give them good, strong work ethics. And I felt like that if they worked hard, they should be rewarded. I remember as a child that, you know, one year I got straight A's. I was a sophomore. I got straight A's in school, you know, doing well academically. And academics has always been a big thing for me and my family. And so I was telling my dad, I got straight A's, you know, all this stuff. And my dad looked at me, he was like, well, son, you did that for you. You didn't do that for me, you know. And I was kind of like, wow, you know, and he just said, you know, that was for you. That wasn't for me, you know. And so I always felt like, but I mean, this is my job while I'm kind of in the house. This is my job. So, you know, you're working, getting paid. How come I can't work? You know, this is kind of my job. I'm doing this, I'm doing chores, you know, where's the sense of reward? And so My children will tell you that I lavishly, between birthdays, this was way back in the day. This is going back, 20, 25 years. But I was like, you get $5 for every A, $3 for a B, nothing for a C. That's kind of how it worked. A and B's is what we're rewarding you with. And so I would start doling out the cash. And my youngest daughter, who is, she just came to visit us. She's hanging out with us now, but she has a doctorate in pharmacy. Mercer, she graduated 2015. She's got a great job now when she's finishing up her second doctorate. And she's one of those girls that when you go to grad school and they say, hey, you're not smart enough, you can't think on your own. So you got to read these scholarly articles, you got to read these papers, and then kind of say what they say. That's what you learn in grad school. You're not smart enough to think on your own. You got to read other people's literature, say what they say, and restate it. So my daughter is on that tier where she's doing all the research. Then you read her stuff, and then you kind of say what she said, And so she's working on. Next year she should finish her second doctorate. But I asked her, I was curious. I said, Jackie, you really kicked it up. You're doing well academically. You was no problems. And I said, what was it for you? How did it happen? She said, Dad, it was all those rewards. You just rewarded us. And so for my household, that worked. Some sense of reward, some sense of responsibility, some sense of accountability. It's in Thomas Gordon book. I got tons of parenting books here at my house. I'm reading lots of literature. And so he makes a statement, I think it's pretty powerful. He says that when children rebel, even our teens, the whole adolescent thing, and they're in the adolescence, they're going to rebel, and and all of this. And in his book he talks a little bit. He says, I think that the rebellion isn't so much against the parent. The rebellion is the leadership that's exhibited within the parent. That's what they're rebelling. It's how you lead. That's the thing they're rebelling against, not necessarily you. And so I thought that was quite important. I thought that was quite informative, that it's how you lead. And so he shares early on in the book that parents, it's hard to try to blame a parent, and because parents are not trained, like and not unless you're reading my literature and reading the other literature. Most parents, we have children, we go, okay, I got this stuff figured out. My parents parented me. I kind of know what kind of worked. I like what I like. I know what I won't do as a parent now. And so, you think, well, I'll just kind of do what my mom and dad did, and that'll be fine. However, unfortunately, I tell parents is that the landscape has changed.
Yeah.
The landscape has changed. And so the methodology that you use, that your parents used on you 20, 30 years ago, you're going to have to make some changes to that method and style of parenting. You can kind of take it at the base and the core, but you're going to have, because the landscape has changed. Everything has changed. I mean, with cell phones, with the tap of a button, your child is exposed to a whole world. When I was in school, it was like, Nancy Reagan was like, just say no. Just say no to drugs. Just say no. Well, I'm telling you now, you can't just tell a kid, just say no. Right. You need to say no and then give an explanation and understand, this is kind of how it plays out. Here's the stuff. I mean, you need to give them the full enchilada than just say no.
And how to practice saying no. you got to show the skill set, because otherwise you just don't have it. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah. So the landscape has changed. Everything has changed. So it's really, in my book and in the workbook that I created, that when I'm lecturing, I share this workbook that I have that goes with the book. I talk about, there's everyone that runs into me, and even the master's class that I'm creating a master's class that I think I was telling you about. And I finished 6 modules. It should be 10 modules total. But in that master's class, early on, before you even do that, there's this parent leadership survey. And what I need to know from you is, what is your leadership style? There's kind of 4 predominant styles that most parents kind of find themselves exhibiting. And you need to know, what is that for you, right? And then once you kind of know what that style is, and I'll get that survey, I go, okay, so then you're authoritarian. Oh, okay, you're permissive. Oh, okay, you're not engaged. Oh, okay, maybe you're participatory. So out of those four that you find yourself in, whatever that is, it'll kind of show up. Then we can kind of go from there. So that's your leadership style. So then we move into, well, what's the pro of that style? Is there a pro? Is there a con? You know,
Right.
and then start kind of get into some critical thinking and some dialogue about that, because you kind of know where you're at as a leader, right? You need to know what kind of leader am I? And if you don't know that, and if we don't talk about that, then it's going to be kind of hard for you to navigate and get through the landmines and different things.
Well, I love that because when you just described that, because I had a question earlier, many times I find one of the problems with parenting is parents who still have unresolved issue with their parents, and they live those out with the children, and trying to get those needs met. But what I love about your understanding your style, when you start to inquire about that, that probably brings a lot of those things up. And what you can show is, even though your parents did this, there were some good things with that. And there were some bad things with that, but it creates that conversation and that awareness that may not have been there, because I see so many parents trying to get their childhood worked out with their own kids, and it just doesn't work well.
Yeah. It's if you find yourself, if your parents were very overbearing, very controlling, didn't let you breathe, then a lot of times parents go, okay, you know what, I'm gonna be on the other side of that. You know, I'm gonna be wide open. We're gonna be permissive. They're gonna feel the love, lots of love here. I'm gonna let Johnny figure it out. I'm not gonna really mandate anything with him, you know. And so, you know, that kind of parenting, studies show, doesn't really work well.
No.
I mean, you might feel like it, but for the most part, it doesn't really work well. So, but it's understanding that and kind of working through that's what your mom did, your dad did. That was your style, you know.
It's the same side of a different coin. And it's so interesting because your parents are still, people don't understand, their parents are still running their life after that, because they're trying to do everything in opposition. And when you don't have real choice, you're in reaction around that. And so that's what I love about your looking at your parenting style. I think that would create all kinds of really great, insightful questions to say, you know what, this was bad about that, but this was good. This was, and start to really see more of a parenting from a like leadership. You have to make choices. You can't be in reaction. You have to understand the playing field you're on. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Clinton, it's been so great. As we finish up, I want to ask, what is an inspirational story or an inspirational message you would like to give to our listeners as we leave? What's one inspirational insight you've had that you would like to share?
I had an aha moment. Just how important parenting is, inspirationally speaking. There's I say I won't bore the listeners, but there's two passages that work for me. One is that in Exodus chapter 20, which I thought was pretty powerful. It's not really a real story, but you kind of have, everyone's familiar with the 10 Commandments. And what I discovered was that the first 4 commandments that's those vertical ones that we talk about, you know, loving God, not honoring the Sabbath, not using his name in vain, and all those kind of things. But it's the 5th commandment that he says, honor your mother and your father, right, that your days would be long. And then after that, he talks about don't steal, don't do those other things. But it's interesting that it's kind of like, after, let's make sure that we get God right. Like, so he's important, right? And so the first 4, let's make sure that we give him reverence. But after that, the 5th one is dealing with family. And so oftentimes when people talk about, you know, I know what's wrong with this country, if we could get families right, you know, then we could fix a lot of stuff, you know, and people say that, but then they don't really give us any tools to really, you know, to help that. Sometimes I read a leadership book, and a leadership book will say, you know what, this would work at home. This would work with your Boy Scouts. This would work in this event, you know, but then they don't really give you any real tool. Like, they don't really walk you through how to make it work. And so my inspiration, my motivation for me is kind of a heavenly viewpoint of, man, heaven says that this is important. And after I've done the God thing, family is next. And so I would like to leave with our listeners that, strong families make strong churches. I know everyone doesn't go to church. Okay. So if you don't go to church, that's okay. Let's go with this. Strong families make strong communities. Strong communities make strong cities, make strong counties, and we had a fella said, let's make America great again, right? So strong families is what will make America great again. Right. And so let's think about family. Let's we don't want our children to try to figure this out. There's too much going on here. So I just think that that's really important. And then here's my last piece. I'll try to get in it as a minute, as a preacher. Hold on. I got my last, here's my next piece I just want to give you. And that is that when you think about ministry, Jesus, who's Son of God, Son of Man, he's God incarnated, all that good stuff. We're celebrating, it's the Advent season, all the stuff. Is that he took time, that he has this ministry. His whole job is to gather the 12, to turn the world upside down, to prepare these men to share this great news, this gospel, all this stuff. But in John's account, Jesus gathers 4 disciples. He gathers, actually, Andrew and Peter has lunch at his house and hangs out. I wish I could have gone to Jesus' house. He actually had a real house. So he had a real house. Read this in John chapter 1. If you didn't know, he had a real house. They hung out all day. Then after that, he went through and he picked up Philip and he picked up Nathaniel. And before he began his worldwide tour of doing this thing, chapter 2, there's this wedding at Cana. And so he stops the gathering of the 4. He stops at the 4 and he spends time with his mom, and he honors his mom to be a part of this wedding that evidently she was overseeing, And so I just think that that's pretty important. And when you think about ministry, let's make sure that we keep our families intact. Sometimes pastors and other leaders, it's all about ministry, and they forego family. And then the children within the family hate ministry, hate church, because they took my dad away from me. I never really had the time, right? So Jesus highlights and says, okay, we're going to do ministry, but we can't forget family. And so chapter 2 is that it's about family, right? And then and here's the last piece. Here's my last nugget. After he turns water into wine and all that good stuff, if you read a little bit further, there's a little verse in there to me which is powerful. And the Bible pretty much says that then Jesus with his brothers, they go back home and he hangs out a few more days. That's powerful. So it's like he not only made the pause to be a part of the wedding, right? Then he goes home and hangs out a few days. I wish I knew the conference. What did the Christ talk about, right? So that's incredible, but he has a 4, and then after that, and then he launches, and then ministry's full on, So for me, when I think about ministry, and I think about family, I have in the old covenant, God says, do me, and let's do family. In the New Testament, his son shows us, we're going to do ministry, but don't leave our family.
Yeah, I love that. And what I hear from that is, give the people in your life the hang time you need. How can we just hang out? Because that's what I think we were made for, was relationship. And I think he led the way by showing that. And thanks for pointing that out. That's really amazing. So Clinton, for those who are listening, how can you can get on our website to get a shotofinspiration.com. You can actually see some of how to get a hold of Clinton or look it up. Just verbally, how can people get a hold of you? How can they get your book? Share with people how to get in touch with you.
Right. So allthingsleaders.com. That's my website, All Things Leaders. So don't put in All Things Leadership, because that won't get me. It's allthingsleaders.com. So if you put in allthingsleaders.com, you get to the website, there's an introduction, all that. And then depending on how it's formatted, there's a store. And I tell people, I direct people to the store. There's a store bio. You go to the store and click on that. Then all the books that I've written pops up there. And all my work is on Amazon. So if you would like to get a copy of Parent Leadership for Today, if you go to the store, then you will see that. You'll see the workbook. You'll see the latest book that I released, which is called Sheroes of the Faith. Phenomenal work, loved it, just really good. I mean, I'm selling copies now, and it's kind of, I wrote it during COVID, and now, you know, I'm picking up, you know, people are hearing about it and getting more steam. So, but that's how you do that. And then if you stay on the website, if you kind of go through, you'll see there's parent leadership, there's parent leadership, there's biblical leadership, and there's corporate leadership. So there's like 3 legs on the website if you would like to kind of know. Anyone who wants to kind of hang close and be with me, the master's class hopefully will be up and running, and there'll be a free video like module 1. If you're thinking, what is parent leadership? Don't know a whole lot about it. You'll actually, there's like a 40-minute segment of me talking about that in great detail. And so you'll get a chance to view that, and then the other content will be available for purchase. But hopefully that'll be available in like March timeframe. But you can get me there. There's an email there. You get all my stuff, and that's it. So
good. Well, Clinton, thank you for being a guest. And everyone, please, if you felt led, reach out to Clinton. I think he's a great resource for you. I know you'll love his book, and also check out his masterclass as he gets that going, hopefully in March 2023. With that, yes. I want to say thank you so much, Clinton, for being here. Thank you, audience, for listening. And I'll see you next time on A Shot of Inspiration. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of A Shot of Inspiration. If you like this or any of our other episodes, make sure you rate it and share it with a friend. This is Greg Stevens, and we look forward to being with you next time. Until then, be bold, be courageous, and respectfully speak your truth.